Clubhouse.
Mrs. Russell, I'm glad to see you. After what happened the other day, I wonder, can we just wipe the slate clean? I do hope so, and I assure you Billy will speak to your husband properly this time. He won't make the same mistake again.
I do not know how many times I have to tell you this, Mrs. Carlton, but Gladys will not marry your son.
Isn't it out of our hands?
Let me speak clearly. If you keep this up, Mr. Russell will see that Billy never gets another job, and we will disinherit Gladys.
You do that to your own child? What sort of a person are you?
As a rule, I'm the sort of person who gets what she wants.
Hot talk this week. Welcome to New Money, Old Rules, the Gilded Age Podcast. This is Caroline.
And this is Mike. Tonight we're discussing episode 2 of season 3, What the Papers Say. It was written by Lord Julian Fellows and Sonia Warfield, not a lord, and directed by Deborah Kampmeyer. Deborah actually previously directed 2 episodes of The Gilded Age, both from season 2. She directed episodes 2 and 4 of season 2. And it was actually episode 4 from season 2, His Grace the Duke. It was the first episode where we actually met Duke Hector. So it's kind of like a full sector with him returning tonight.
Nice. Just a community note, if you want to continue the conversation and get some extra history notes, please join us on Facebook in the Gilded Age Fan Group HBO series. Just a reminder, if you guys have not watched, please go watch the episode and then come on back. We don't hit every single plot point, but we do talk about the highs and the lows and what we expect to see next.
I owe the Facebook page a lot of history notes because there was actually a ton from episode 1 that just for time purposes, it would have made this podcast just like a history podcast, which I'm sure some people would be into, but I think maybe dry listening for others. So yeah, definitely head over to the Facebook page. I'm going to be populating stuff now that our episode embargo from episode 1 is up. I'm definitely going to populate it with some nice history notes from that first episode. This episode, not a lot of history notes to comment on. So you're spared that this week, Caroline. Let's talk about some new cast members that finally make their appearance. Some that were very, I think people were excited about as news was coming about season 3 while we were waiting for season 3 to come out. First is Jordan Donica, who joins the cast tonight as Dr. William Kirkland. He is going to be recurring all season, and based on the smiles and glances that we saw Peggy and Marion exchanging with each other, maybe a little something more for Peggy.
We also had Bill Camp. For all of you guys who are Leftovers lovers, Bill Camp played God on The Leftovers. He's playing J.P. Morgan Sr., and we have Hannah Shealy as Charlotte Astor, which I was surprised to see another Astor daughter and not so much focus on Carrie, but Charlotte, the older sister.
Well, you know, Mrs. Astor does famously have the 5 children, and we met a little bit of the second oldest sister. So Charlotte in the order is the middle child. She is the third of 5. That's who we meet tonight, played by Hannah Shealy, like you said. Carrie is the 4th in the 5 kids. So she's the second youngest, the youngest daughter. Then there is we met briefly, I think in season 1, the second oldest who was married to the Roosevelt heir, but we haven't met the youngest, and I don't think we've met the oldest of the Astor kids. So Charlotte, though, if you're into your history, which I'm not going to get into because it's a little spoilery, Charlotte has a colorful history in the past, which I'm curious to see by introducing her now in 1884, how the show is going to play her timeline, because she does have some very interesting things that happens to her, but not until later in her life in the real world timeline. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play in her storyline. I didn't really have an episode theme for this week. I thought about it, and so it's just kind of a blank on my notes, but I was curious. Like, I felt like last week when we were getting season arcs for people, but also secrets seemed to be at play. Mm-hmm. I was curious what your overall theme from this episode was.
We're still dealing with secrets for sure. And I think a lot of this push and pull, parents versus children seems to be a massive one. A lot of the whole manners versus relationships. How far can you go? What can you be doing? What you can't be doing? I think there was a lot of small themes. I don't think there was one huge theme that ran across the whole thing.
One of the things that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this season is the state of the Russell house, the emotional state of it. Obviously, George's business is always George's primary arc, right? It's always his primary concern when you're talking about that character. But I think this episode really sets the tone for, I think George is a little adrift at home and maybe feels like he has been removed from the conversation, maybe a little too much at home. And there seems to be some seeds of anger, especially as the episode goes on, because he walks into the Russell house is apparently being picked up for gossip fodder. Now, they touched on this in the premiere a little bit, and it seems to be some combination of, it does appear Bertha maybe is leaking information about the family.
Like planting information for
right.
the
But then there does seem to be other stuff not favorable to the Russells, which we hear a little bit about in this episode, of not Bertha planted gossip, which could be a problem for them. The Russells are all about controlling the information. Even with Gladys running away, I think one of the first things Bertha says to George when they're alone is, I'm going to need your help to make sure the papers don't get a hold of this because it would be a scandal.
This feels very British to me in terms of like, this is the kind of stuff that even now, you know, it's like, what did Meghan Markle say to Kate Middleton and all that kind of stuff? Like, there's a lot of that still goes on within the royals. And I feel like we're getting a little taste of that as Americans in this.
The gossip fodder for this episode, the prevailing gossip fodder, is that there was an article essentially saying that Gladys and the Duke are already engaged. The Duke is returning to town. He is staying with the Russells, which was brand new news to George. He did not know. And that essentially, for all intents and purposes, they're just here to cross T's, dot I's, but they aren't engaged. Which, again, news to George and also news to Gladys. Though it shouldn't be news to Gladys, but yet it still remains kind of news to Gladys.
I feel like she's just so bent on the idea that it just won't happen that she's not even seeing the writing on the wall at all. She's just so concerned with Billy, if you will, that it seems like she's letting it cloud her understanding of the situation and not take good steps in order to protect herself.
I have a clip that we're going to play later on this episode called Billy Simp. So I think we all may have an understanding of where I think old Billy Carlton is coming from. But
we need to start from the end of last episode because we had a lot of questions about where was Gladys running to, and we had some ideas. I thought maybe it was the Astors, just because I thought Carrie being her best friend, it just made a lot of sense to me that she would run to this house of women. I did not expect her to run to the Carltons, but that was your first guess. There was something about that just seemed like that would be like too much dirty laundry in front of your prospective fiance, that you wouldn't do that. But clearly she feels comfortable enough to go to his mother and, you know, be there at the house at 2 a.m. and all that kind of stuff. So she's really, really testing Bertha in all this. What did you think about the way that Bertha handled it?
I think Bertha handled it like the boss lady she is. And, you know, I think Bertha is interesting in this Billy Carlton storyline because of how she is having to interact with Billy's mother, Joan Carlton, who returned in this episode as being played by Victoria Clark. I don't think we said that last week. The clip that opened this episode that you heard before our credits rolled was the second of their two interactions, but I want to play them kind of back to back because I think it's important for a couple things. One, I think it's important to demonstrate that Joan Carlton does seemingly want Billy to marry for love, and two, does not really understand the world that she actually lives in, or at least the world that now has Bertha where she is. The same way Gladys said to Bertha last week at the end of the episode, 3 years ago, you would have killed for us to be in the Carlton's drawing room. And Bertha responded without missing a beat, we've outgrown them. Joan Carlton, she literally says, you know, I don't want to pull rank on you here. Girl, what? Like, there's no rank to be pulled. You are 3 years too late for that party. Mrs. Astor is appealing to Bertha for help now. You are no one. You are a non-entity, just like your simp son, the way that Bertha said last week. Let's kick this off. We have a lot of clips to play with Bertha and Mrs. Carlton and Bertha and George. Let's play Bertha audio clip 1.
They were never alone. I made sure of that. You have nothing to fear.
I woke to find my daughter gone. A nightmare for any parent.
She was at the breaking point when she came. I merely sent for a doctor.
But not for her mother?
I suggested that. But you can imagine her reaction.
It's a family matter, Mrs. Carlton.
Mrs. Russell, won't you sit down? Can't we start again?
Meaning what exactly?
I know Billy got off on the wrong foot, but the children seem well suited.
Not to me.
I hesitate to pull rank, but my great-grandfather signed the Declaration of Independence. What were your ancestors doing then, I wonder?
I thought you understood that Gladys is about to be engaged.
It isn't what Gladys said.
Well, according to you, she was out of her mind.
What if they can't be stopped?
But they can, and they will be.
And it's just that simple. They can and they will be. Joan, Mrs. Carlton, has just apparently given up trying to control her son, which maybe is the way of things at this time.
It also seems like there wasn't any need to control him because Billy doesn't seem like the type of kid who did go color outside the lines. You know, he seems like somebody who absolutely listens to his mom. So she doesn't have to play with this like iron fist voice with him. You know, she can just talk to him and he listens to her. So this is a different dynamic than what Bertha's used to. Bertha is like looking at her like, what are you talking about? You can't control what your child does, you know? The Carltons have a much more calm household, it seems, a much more like they can just deal with their kids. And the whole concept of disinheriting that we're going to talk about here in just a second, that is shocking, I think, for most parents to hear another parent say that, you know, like you would actually disinherit your kid. So it is wild. And they just seem to have completely different relationships. So let's listen to that second clip.
Mrs. Russell, I'm glad to see you. After what happened the other day, I wonder, can we just wipe the slate clean? I do hope so, and I assure you Billy will speak to your husband properly this time. He won't make the same mistake again.
I do not know how many times I have to tell you this, Mrs. Carlton, but Gladys will not marry your son.
Isn't it out of our hands?
Let me speak clearly. If you keep this up, Mr. Russell will see that Billy never gets another job, and we will disinherit Gladys.
You'd do that to your own child? What sort of a person are you?
As a rule, I'm the sort of person who gets what she wants.
So obviously, Mrs. Carlton just has a completely different way of parenting than Bertha does. And I also think she's a different kid. You know, what's right for Billy isn't right for Gladys or Larry even, you know. So Bertha is playing the parent that her kids need, but so is Mrs. Carlton.
I think that's an important point. The idea that, yes, the Carltons definitely seem to be very comfortable. They don't seem to have a lot of worries. They're
relaxed, right?
Very relaxed because I think they're just probably very established in the middle of the pack. Their money is old and it's not going anywhere. Their river is just very calm, but also they don't have a daughter that they have to marry off to society. It's a little bit like how we're seeing Larry seems like he can kind of carry on with Marion, and Bertha, at least right now anyway, has not turned her sights to whatever is going on there.
Not yet, but doesn't that feel
she's at dinner tonight. Like, I mean, Bertha has to be but she's not turning to Larry and be like, you're next. Like, hold on to your butts. But marrying a daughter off and making sure she's being put off into society correctly. Bertha, different set of considerations, but also different stations in life. Yes, the Carltons are comfortable old money that are relaxed. The Russells are new money, but it's a lot of freaking money though.
You can like feel like a desperation, like a clawing, you know, that comes out of the Russell house. There's like stink lines practically that comes off their house in terms of like, we want more. Like there's like a beating, pulsing heart in that house that again, the Carltons just seem so chill comparatively.
You raised a good point when we were watching the episode that I wanted to bring up here, because there's an aspect to Gladys and the Duke marrying each other that no one really is discussing. And you brought it up. It's the point of no one's talking about they don't really like each other, or that doesn't even seem to be concerned if that they may come to like each other or let alone love each other.
Well, no one's trying to sell anyone on the idea that they could actually fall in love eventually, which is something that actually in arranged marriages you often hear. They'll say like, you'll grow to know each other and you'll grow to love each other. That's like a very common mantra you hear out of the parents who are trying to arrange a marriage. So I'm really surprised that like no one is even entertaining the idea that once they get to know each other, maybe it will be okay. You know, there's all these like, don't worry, it's not going to be that bad, you know, but nobody's even suggesting that it could be okay or even good. One of the things that they commonly say in all of these episodes and even last season is, I don't know him. I don't know him and he doesn't know me. It just seems like where are just some basic, like, you know, with a chaperone properly, all the things. Why are we not even trying to lay a foundation for their relationship? Like Bertha, she's almost showing her cards of being a novice at this because she's not attempting to actually make a foundation. She's just fixated on the status and the money and that aspect, but not really thinking about like, if I really want this to be a relationship that lasts, I should give them an opportunity. Like I should plan some outings and whatever with a chaperone to get, you know, let them get to know each other and at least try to sell the idea that like it could be okay. You guys could be at least good friends, right? Like maybe not in love, but you could have a life together.
Bertha definitely seems to be stuck in the just above the fold PR events.
Yeah.
And none of the get to know each other. You know,
like elegant dinners, but not an actual conversation. Like she's not even allowed to really say anything during those dinners.
That's true. And also, maybe from Bertha's standpoint, God knows what Gladys would say if they were left alone. But one of the things I always liked from season 1, not that Mr. Rakes was a good guy or a guy that that in the end that we wanted Marion to be with. I loved the episode where they went for the walk to look at the Statue of Liberty torch in the park.
Yeah.
That was the kind of thing that is missing from the Duke and Gladys. He shows up just for big dinners or big opera events. Where's the put them together, a chaperone 20 feet behind them, and let them get to know each other? George is going to say, we're going to turn to George now and his role in this episode. First, his conversation he has with Gladys, and then his conversations he has with Bertha. At the very end of the episode, his conversation with Bertha, he says, you can't force her to marry a man she doesn't like. And Bertha retorts, she doesn't know him yet. But still doesn't make the pitch of, but once they get to know each other, they may learn to not only like each other, but love each other. Mm-hmm. It is an interesting thing that is not being pitched, that at one point, I didn't know your father, and then I did, and then I fell in love with him. And yes, it wasn't an arranged marriage. We married for love. But being put together, part of that is, he's not a 90-year-old geezer or dinosaur. Right. He's not young like you're young, but he's not old. He's around our age, and he is interesting, and he is a duke, and maybe there is room to learn to have an affection. At least as a selling point, you're 1,000% correct. How come that isn't part of it? Because Gladys does want to feel like she's in love. She does want to be swept off her feet.
And I would almost say, like, it also sort of ignores the idea that, you know, you want to get to know this person too. That is part that kind of bugs me, is that I feel like even Bertha herself doesn't really seem to care to know the Duke or care to know the circumstances that Gladys is actually getting into. Like, she doesn't really know the state of his estate. Yeah, like, she doesn't really know everything. This is the part where I think that Bertha's ambition, while it is great that she's like so strong and she's so driven, there's also a part to her where she puts these blinders on and she gets such tunnel vision that you're like, if you just played this a little bit more relaxed, if you just said, you know, you're right, you should have a chance to get to know him. Why don't I set up some different opportunities for you guys to just have conversations, find out a little bit about each other. Maybe you guys do have common ground. That's like very like, I want to say like matchmaker 101, you know, like just start with some common ground. So I feel for Gladys because I do think she's getting a horrible situation, but I don't think it has to be horrible. And I'm really crossing my fingers that maybe as we learn more about the Duke, maybe he's going to turn out to be okay.
It's interesting when we think back, because we're where we're at now, where Bertha has the Duke. It's Bertha's Duke. She's the one arranging for his tours of New York now. But think back to when we first met the Duke. That was Winterton's idea. The Winterton was bringing the Duke here. Bertha didn't know anything about the Duke. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what research has Bertha done about this Duke of Buckingham beyond he has the title Duke of Buckingham? We haven't seen, but this show definitely does things off screen without telling us. There's a couple of times in this episode, actually, where I was not quite happy about things that happened off screen that we didn't find out about. So I'm curious, has Bertha done any research? Does she have any idea beyond his name is Hector? Does she know anything about him personally? I don't know. It's certainly nothing that we have shown. It's not like we haven't seen Dear Diary. Gladys continues to be a petulant child, but if she only knew Hector as I've gotten to know him, she'll learn that he's actually kind and caring and loves dogs and puppies and long walks and is better than Billy in every way. You know, none of that.
Yeah.
But that's also not Bertha's style, though. I mean, she's too business.
It's not her style, but at the same time, it's too much. Like, because again, I just feel like she's showing her cards of being so, you know, out of her element herself. Like, you're right. Everyone else knew, like Winterton, a maid, knew more about going to go get this Duke than Bertha really did. It's one of those things that as it unfolds, I'm like, oh man, there are more cracks and more cracks in your plan here.
Let's talk about Gladys and George, because that's the other aspect of here. That's the really family aspect here. This is Bertha's business, and she makes it very clear in this episode. Bertha's business is the business of the Duke and marrying him to Gladys. There is also the other aspect of this episode, George's part in this, where it's, Dad. You know, he's coming back from Morenci, Arizona. He's trying to save a bank with JP Morgan. He's trying to pitch him on his vision, but then he also has to come into literally Bertha and Gladys yelling at each other. Just mothers planning, like, and George says, like, you have to be protected from your mother, and Bertha accusing Gladys of being a petulant child who runs away. Not the welcome home that George was looking forward to. But let's get into the conversation here. This is where George is trying to temper Gladys a little bit on, your mother does have a plan here, and maybe take a step back and look at the whole board.
Please don't scold me.
I don't agree with your methods, nor your mother's. But I understand her intention, and that is to give you an astonishing opportunity.
But an opportunity for what?
To be one of the most influential women of your generation.
I don't want to be influential. And I refuse to be Mother's project. Let me be my own person.
Marriage is the one way you can do that. And this marriage would give you the power to change lives.
You promised I could marry for love. And I'm in love with Billy Carlton.
If you and Billy think the best way to pursue this is by running away, then neither of you is ready to marry.
What if he were to ask you now? He'll be at Mrs. Fane's party.
Very well. I'll hear his arguments. I only want what's best for you.
But you think that's the Duke?
I think you should consider all of your options, including Hector.
I think that's the first time we've heard George call the Duke Hector, which is interesting.
Yeah, it seems like we're trying to make it a little bit more familiar, a little bit more cool, and that's a good way to do it. Just that name change. Just stop calling him your Duke, my Duke, his Duke, your Duke, whatever, all that.
Duke.
Just calling him Hector. It does humanize him in a way that we haven't. Again, that's kind of where I'm coming from. That dehumanization that is, yes, happening to Gladys, but is also happening to him. I mean, he is just a title. He is just an estate. He is just this opportunity coming her way, but not a person. Like, we've not yet talked about who is he? I don't even know. And we've watched this for several seasons and I couldn't tell you. Is he a violent man? Is he a kind man? Is he someone who argues with people? Is he someone who gets along? Like, I don't know anything about him as an audience member. So I understand, you know, where Gladys is coming from, but I appreciate that George is trying to take the tact now of, look, let's give everyone a chance, including Hector.
Right. And I think by using his name, it's also smart on George because it is dad mode George, but it also presenting to a degree unified parenting front, which is important here, especially for Gladys, who is headstrong and is putting so much stake in you, dad, will protect me from big bad mom. For George to say Hector, I felt like was, even though he is mad at Bertha and does not agree with her tactics, which he says at the beginning of that clip, and we're going to get into their strife, I think to Gladys anyway, he's doing the work of presenting a unified front here.
I have to tell you, I find it fascinating that Bertha allows and puts up with the concept of anyone needing to be protected from her. I can tell you in my own world, if one of my kids were to be like, I need to be protected from mom, I'm sorry, I would lose my shit, because I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like, I am your biggest protector. Like, I'm not somebody you need to be protected from. But like, I can't believe she allows that conversation in the house, because I would shut that down. I'd be like, oh, no. If you think that your life is bad, you don't even have any idea what's going on in this world. I mean, I would forbade it, man. I would be like, you're not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to say stuff like that in my home about me, you know, like, you can't talk to me that way.
But maybe Bertha wants to be feared a little bit.
That's fine, but you don't want your own children screaming that they need to be protected from you. Okay,
Wow,
that's garbage.
For sure.
Okay, and I understand, but I just don't get it why between George and Bertha, like, why they even entertain that type of talk.
Well, George does say to her, I mean, George immediately went back to Gladys and said, from your own mother, kind of like a disgusted, like, you are a child, because it's child
if
behavior.
You're gonna talk like that,
Yes,
you know, you certainly are. And also, where is your respect for your mother?
Very little respect being shown by Gladys.
I mean, and I get it. She is, you know, we're supposed to be at this point where she's transitioning. They made a real big point in the first episode of saying, like, she's transitioning from a child to a young woman and all this kind of stuff. I get it, but we did that season already. Okay, so she has been out in society. She's been a grown adult now for a bit. I really feel like, Gladys, I'm expecting more out of you at this point, and you've got to use your words better, which I feel like she does sometimes with Bertha. She finds a way to speak to her that she does get through, and it is still respectful. But all this, like I said, I would just, oh my God, I would squelch that talk so hard.
So Billy does have permission to approach George. George says, taking his own advice, he gives Gladys. He's willing to hear Billy Carlton's arguments out for why he should be allowed to marry Gladys. George certainly has not agreed to anything. Whether or not Bertha has, that's a separate conversation that they will have. And Billy has his chance at the Young Women Christians Association meeting hosted by Aurora Fane, The Ghastly Gathering, which really goes horrible for everyone except for Oscar in every way. What did you think of Billy's performance here in his big moment?
Man, I mean, he had the posture of a broiled shrimp by the end. He was so spineless. I couldn't help but feel like, you know what? Bertha's right. This man is not going to be able to stand up for Bertha versus anything that comes their way. He's clearly just going to shrink into the background, be a wallflower. He doesn't want to even stand in the same room with the captains of industry, much less ever grow to become one of them. So the fact that he could not even speak,
not a word.
Oh my gosh.
Look at it again. Watch it again. Not a word.
And his face looks like he's just melting into the ground.
Atherton says to him, he's the one that George is standing with when they're talking, when Billy approaches him, says, Mr. Carlton? Not a word. You can literally see his bowels turn to water.
Yeah. It's sad news because guess what? While we're not getting to learn anything about Hector, we're getting to learn a lot about Billy. And the things that I'm seeing, it does not make me feel like that this is a man who is ever going to stand up for Gladys. Let's say up against his own mom. I mean, if his mom has some other ideas about what they should be doing in their household.
Even-tempered.
Yeah, but see, she does have a comment. I mean, you think that for a second Billy's going to stand up to his mom for anything? Like, no.
No, he's literally about to say in the clip here, it wasn't what your mom said, it was what my mom said to me.
Yes.
You're a grown-ass man, Billy. You're talking about moms here. But so two things, listeners, you have to keep in mind. There are two things happening here at the Young Women Christians Association meeting. Billy's having his chance, which he blows to speak to George. But at the same time that's happening, in literally the other room, Bertha has just told Mrs. Carlton, if you don't stop with this, I came up with Billis.
Oh, okay.
As a matchmaking.
Nice.
I was going to go with Gladly, which also works, but nothing Gladly about these two. So Billis, if you don't stop trying to make Billis happening, we will ruin Billy. He will never have a job. He will have no prospects. And then I'll come for you next. Like, she puts the foot down. Like, how many times do I have to tell you? And so those two things are happening at the same time. But when Billy approaches George, he's not aware of that threat that has been made by Bertha. Mm-hmm. So Billy never says a word to George, circles right back out and runs the hell out the front door. Joan right on his heels, Mrs. Carlton right on his heels. They jump in the carriage. She gives her great, what a ghastly gathering line.
That was such a good line.
It's a good line.
Excellent writing.
That really should have been
Lord
the name of the episode. Name should have been the Ghastly Gathering.
That was an excellent line.
She says to him, and now maybe this is just mom soothing egos. She says, they were using you. You're well to be away from them, and they were just trying to use you. Now, whether he meant the Russells and together or Gladys specifically, unclear, but no one was trying to use Billy. You are a non-entity. Haven't you been paying attention?
Okay, but hold on. Use him in terms of Gladys could be using him just to get out of the Duke situation.
Maybe, and that's what she was referring to.
So then in that case, it's not about love, Billy. It's about Gladys wanting to not have to get married to this other guy.
But they certainly weren't using Billy as leverage to make Gladys more attractive to the Duke. The Duke has zero interest in like, oh, Billy Carlton is pursuing her, so now I'm more interested in Gladys.
Yeah.
He wants George's bank account. That's who he wants in bed with him. As far as we know, we don't actually know Hector at all.
Right.
The way it's being pitched to us is this is a marriage of George's money, Gladys, and the Duke.
Yeah. She's just a part of the fortune he gets to take.
But so take that all into account. Keep the Young Women's Christians Association meeting in your account. And now Billy shows up at the dinner at the Russells' house, where again, doesn't even have the courage to come in the front door like a man. He comes in the servants' entrance where Larry has to usher Gladys away so they can speak. Let's listen to Billy the Simp.
Will you come in and speak to my father now? No.
Why not?
Because I don't have the strength to fight anymore.
What did my mother say?
It's not what she said so much as what my own mother told me.
What does that have to do with our engagement?
Gladys, I'm a tiny cog in the wheel of industry. I cannot afford to challenge the people driving it. I see your parents talking with the biggest decision makers on Wall Street, and I know I'm not in that league and never will be.
You shouldn't be afraid of my father.
When I'm trying to thwart his plans for his daughter, I've been a fool. The newspapers practically say you're engaged. It was the main topic of conversation at the party.
But I'm not engaged. And my father promised me I could marry for love, so you see, I have every
Things are different
right.
now, and our love is no longer practical. The plain truth is, Gladys, I'm not the man you need me to be.
That is probably the most self-aware line that has been uttered in this entire show. Because Billy is so right. You know, I know you're calling him Billy the simp, but at the same time, I think he actually understands his lot in life. He gets where he is. You know, he's just going to be this middleman all the time. He's never going to be the CEO of anything. He's always just going to be a little cog in the wheel. And he seems happy with that. The part where Gladys is constantly saying, like, I don't want to be influential. I don't want to be important. I don't want to like have anything. In a way, Billy represents that for her. And so I get it why she's attracted to him being in the middle of the pack, because that's all she really wants. But for Billy, he is so right on that these are the big wigs of the world, and you're asking me to go toe to toe with them, and I just don't have the backbone to do it. I'm proud of him for at least saying so, because the worst man, the true simp, is the guy who gets way further down the line and then absolutely never backs her. You know, they do get married and he ends up being like a complete jerk in like hiding behind his mom or worse, hiding behind Gladys's legs, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like just playing this weak little boy for the rest of her life is not what she would be happy with at all. She wants someone who will stand up to Bertha, and he's never going to do that.
No. He literally can't even say hello at a party to her father.
He's saving her a lot of heartache, honestly.
And I think this is an important eye-opening moment, though, for Glass. Because, yes, that continues on, and he's like, please don't hate me, and they're both crying. And she's like, how could I hate you? I still love you. Okay, you're saying that now, you're in the moment. But reflect on this, and yes, you're saying you don't want to be influential or important. You want to marry in the middle of the pack, which Billy is perfect for. Genetics are genetics. You are the daughter of George and Bertha Russell. There's a line in you, whether you're aware of it or not. You actually will not be okay with just being in the middle of the pack. And this is youth. This is the folly of youth where we think we understand things and we don't. But under that skin, you cannot be George and Bertha's child and not want to, if not run the world, at least have a say in how the world is run. And maybe you just don't know that yet, but Billy certainly is not going to get there. And you know what? You're right. I was calling him simp because of the beginning of that clip of, it is what my mom said. But it does take a real man to realize who he is and who he is not. And I give him actually a lot of credit for, yes, while our love is no longer practical, for sure a panty dropper line, that is the maybe most sexy thing anyone wants to hear. Our love is no longer practical. I do give him actually a ton of credit to admit that he is not the man that she needs. And you're 1,000% correct. He will never stand up to Bertha. He will never fight for her. If a question of children, can you imagine these two having kids and Bertha having a say on how they raise their children or anything? No, it would constantly be listen to your mother.
Yeah, no, it would be insane. And
she would be on her own.
And not only that,
Gladys would be on her own all the time.
Yes. And she would be stuck with trying to run a household with this weakling not by her side that, first of all,
by her side, but not doing anything.
And she is unaccustomed to that. She is used to having partners in crime, whether it be her mom, her dad, or her brother, who are strong and assertive and aggressive people. So for her, as much as she thinks that Billy would be this like remedy for her life, it's really just a cop-out. I mean, that's all he really is just a way to duck out of society instead of, you know, standing in the shoes that are set before you. I appreciate the fact that he put his bluster away and his arrogance and all of his ego and just said, like, look, man, I'm not the one. I can't do this. I can't stand in these shoes with you.
Before we continue with George and really get into George and Bertha, which at the end of the day, I think is some of the heart of this episode because it's going to set a tone for the season. I want to take a quick diversion because you mentioned Larry and how he is a partner in crime to Gladys in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Does it surprise you how involved and or vocal he is in his sister's love life and marriage talk? He is constantly inserting himself into it, especially with his mother. He is being the advocate to his mother that Gladys thought her father would be and is, I guess, but he's away on business.
Right. In his absence, Larry
But Larry has his own business. Larry is a man emerging. He's trying to do his thing with Jack. He's trying to woo Marion. He's got stuff going on. I was watching this episode and thinking about Larry is the one facilitating Gladys doing all of it and recommended she elope last week, which is funny because at the beginning of this episode, the servants were like, who's going to tell Bertha? And then it's Larbear telling Bertha that Gladys had run away. And the first thing Gladys says is, oh my God, do you think she eloped? Which was what Larry's advice was her. So does it surprise you he's so involved and so vocal?
It doesn't surprise me just because we've seen them have a pretty great sibling relationship throughout this entire series. I feel like, whether it been the very beginning when it was like all of her coming out stuff and he was sticking up for her and trying to be like, Mom, like let her do this, let her do that, whatever little parts. I think partially because he's experienced a lot of freedom. I mean, he went away to college. Gladys has been living in this house, with them for who knows, her whole life, and she hasn't had a chance to see more of the world and do more of the things that Larry has. I appreciate a character and especially a brother character who he's not doing it to gain anything other than just be a good brother and just say, Mom, like, come on, like, just give her a little bit of space. I feel great about who he is. And I know we had a lot of red flags last week. And I feel like this is one of his green flags big time is that he is a really good brother to Gladys. And the whole elope talk, that to me was him being like George Jr. and him being like, what power do I have to protect her? I can't really go toe to toe with my mom. I can say what I want, but she's not going to yield to me. So what can I counsel my sister to do? And he was actually trying to come up with other solutions for her. And, the eloping idea was like, this is the only way to really block her from you marrying someone else. Although we both know, given the Peggy storyline, that dads can just force the guy to write a letter saying, no, I'm not really, a viable candidate for marriage, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So we already know that they can just wipe away a marriage without any problem. So who knows, like, what they would have done had she eloped. I feel like they would have figured out a way to get it annulled and moved on anyway.
You look tired. I hope the trip was a success.
I have piqued Mr. Morgan's interest.
Good. And I need your help. If her antics leak to the paper, she'll ruin everything.
You've put her in this position.
A position that will make her the envy of every woman living.
And to make her life a misery. Is that what you want?
When there are children, they will be among the highest-ranking people on Earth. Do you really want that wrecked by Billy Carlton?
I said she could marry for love.
George, I'm building her future. A golden life. Isn't that worth more than a hasty promise?
And then she uses, as you say, her wiles to diffuse the conversation. And that's the end of that conversation. Yeah. But it doesn't feel like the end of the conversation.
George is getting more and more angry. I mean, I'm worried about these two because he is really starting to get sick and tired. First of all, just being left out of information, which seems to be Bertha's MO now, is just to leave information out of the packet for him at all times. That would get very ugly. It's one thing to have an ambitious spouse. It's another thing to have a deceitful spouse, especially with you, like, not telling you what the plan is.
Right, when you're supposed to be on the same side, which they have always been on the same side, right? That's the George and Bertha credo, is us together against the world. Whether we are rich, and if we lose it all and it burns all down, we'll build it back again. But together. And when you're then leaving, now it's Bertha with the Duke and kind of leaving everyone else out in the cold a little bit, which is a problem. And I think George is already sensing that that's a problem. I'm curious, though, from this first clip, and then I want to get to the second one, which is towards the end of the episode and really, I think, sets in motion the anger. This is George being perturbed he is easy to be diffused here, the kissing and stuff, and he moves off of the conversation. He lets it be. It's actually after this bit that he has that conversation with Gladys about give Hector a chance. I'll listen to Billy, all of that. That comes after this scene that we just listened to.
If you guys go back and rewatch the scene, watch how Bertha changes in her face so quickly. She's talking to him very insistently, and then her face softens and she starts kissing him and everything. But once he pulls away, her face goes right back to serious business. I mean, Carrie Coon, bravo, because I mean, it's like she turns like a light switch on and off throughout this conversation, being soft and being extremely aggressive. Like, it's amazing. She does a really great job showing all of the different aspects of Bertha coming at George.
There's going to be a demonstration of that in this clip I'm about to play. You can hear the tone change, but it's even more stunning as a bit of acting visually. Go back and watch it when she is being very conciliatory towards George and trying to see my side of it about Billy is failure and the Duke is winning and all that. And then George asks a question that then switches Bertha on. He says, when do I have a say in our children's lives? And she's going to say, when I have a say in your boardroom about rails and ironworks. But there's a tone switch there. And there's also her spine literally stiffens and she sits up, she sits forward or stands forward more. But you'll hear it tonally. Let's listen to, this is the clip from the end of the episode between these two.
It's true that he's coming to New York. It's true that I've arranged some parties for him. What else can I tell you?
Did you think I would just stay in Arizona until everything was arranged?
George, life goes on even when you're away on business.
The fact remains, Billy Carlton has not had an opportunity to present his argument. She says she loves him. Shouldn't we listen to her?
George, she's 18. She still has her dolls in her room. She ran away like a petulant child. Should we let her choose failure over triumph?
She's not choosing failure.
That's where you're wrong.
Rushing her into it does not seem right.
George, I don't expect you to understand this because you're not a woman, but I am trying to empower her. You think you're helping by caving in, but she's young. She doesn't know anything about love or the world or anything else. I'm trying to protect her future. Won't you help me?
Bertha, you cannot expect her to marry a man she doesn't like.
She doesn't know him. If she gives him a chance, she'll like him well enough.
I just want to know when I get a say in our daughter's life.
The day I'm in your boardroom giving you my ideas on the railroads and the steel mills. Until that day, I won't question your business if you don't question mine.
Have you told me everything?
Of course.
I cannot stand that when he asks, have you told me everything? Because that just feels like, come on, you're an adult in the world. When somebody asks you that, you better stop and think, did I tell you everything? Am I willing to take the risk here of lying to you about this whole thing? Her analogy doesn't work for me with the boardroom and the kids because of this. She has things that are outside of the children. She has this entire social world that she is working through. So it would not be the equivalent to say, I come to your boardroom and then that's the equivalent of you talking about our kids. No. The kids are a partnership project we're doing. But you have your own society things. You have your charities. You have the opera house. That's the equivalent of my boardroom, not the children. The children are something we're doing together. So I don't agree with how she's even comparing it.
Even if it's the children on who they're friends with, because that then relates to society or where they go to school, those kinds of things.
Or maybe even a place they can go. Like, can they go somewhere unchaperoned or something like that? Like, I'm with you on that. Okay, fine. That's all on the Bertha side of it because that's the society manners.
The marriage of the children, especially the marriage of the daughter, is joint parent things. And also the marriage of the daughter has a very significant business component to it. And how do I know that? Because the thing that she has not told him is when the Duke arrives in the next scene with Lawyer Dobbs in tow, because there are things for us still to complete. George says, you said you told me everything. Ugh. And Bertha's response is, well, now I have, okay? Well,
No,
were you
man.
lying then or are you lying now? Because you're lying at one or the other places, and I still don't think she hasn't told him everything. Then the lawyer shows up, and the Duke's response is, well, and George is like, you brought your lawyer? And the Duke's like, well, we still got things to discuss and finalize. George is like, I don't know what the actual hell you're talking about.
I would be so uncomfortable in your own house, for you to not know your own business stuff. What kind of slam is that against George?
Bertha, she has to know she can't do this against George. She can do this to everyone else in society. She could do this to everyone else in her house, including her children. You can't do this to George.
She at least shouldn't do it to George.
Well, obviously she can. She did.
but she shouldn't, because like we talked about it. This is a teamwork situation. We both have to work together. And guess what? He has to come up with the money to back your promises. You need him.
Even if George had delegated, you figure out the best marriage and match for her. I trust you, which is what he essentially tells to Gladys in this episode is she is setting you up for a great opportunity with Hector that you're not giving a fair shake to. Yeah, we haven't given Billy a fair shake, but I'll listen to Billy, but you need to give the Duke a fair shake. Your mom is setting you up for a great opportunity. Even if he has delegated that to Bertha as part of her bag of things to take care of, there is business involved here. That's why there's a lawyer. There is dowry. There is allowances. There is money to the British estate. That's business. You can't be writing George's checks because that is you then trying to be in the boardroom, which you just said is not part of the thing. This is something that they need to be doing together.
Well, and
Bertha has overstepped the lines because she's not doing this thing they should be doing together. I was
going to use the word overstep too, because it's funny. She is like kind of accusing him of overstepping by even caring about his children. But then she is actually the one overstepping and promising things financially that she doesn't have any biz. She doesn't really seem to know their finances. She really doesn't. I mean, she'll come in the room and be like, is everything going okay? And that's about it. It's not like we ever see her poring over bank statements or something like that. Right. So she doesn't seem to have an actual clue about where they stand, except for that it's okay. We're doing good.
Right.
But that's the extent of it.
JP Morgan was interested.
But
that's wonderful.
Checks on, on their checkbooks that really she has no business writing.
What's the line from Top Gun? You're writing checks that your body can't cash. You're writing checks that you don't know if George can cash. Now, we all knew coming out of season 2's finale, she made a deal with the Duke. It was classic television in the way the camera moved and the questions and the looks. We knew she did a deal. We knew she essentially sold Gladys for him to show up to win the opera war.
That hotel door closing behind her. Oof. That was the moment where it felt like The Godfather. It felt like we're someone's making a deal in this room,
So we knew there was a deal done, but we still don't know what she promised him. George certainly doesn't. He doesn't still know everything. Have you told me everything? Of course.
Ugly.
Okay. Have you told me everything now? Of course. Okay. But she hasn't, though, because there were no facts and figures. We have to assume at this point, Bertha has not told George what has she promised the Duke. And I cannot wait to find out, because we know from his conversation with JP Morgan and his vision what George is planning to do by connecting the country via single railway is going to cost more money than George Russell currently has.
Yeah.
So if he's already spending all of the money he currently has and then some, because that's why he needs JP Morgan's backing, how much money can be left for the Duke and whatever promise Bertha has made? This is instantly looking like a financial failure. Talk about the Panic of 1884. There's a Panic of the Russell household of 1884.
So let me ask you this. So do you think that George is equally in the wrong for not coming to Bertha and discussing their finances more clearly because of how the finances are tied up into the marriage whole portion? Like, is he allowed to only weigh in on the marriage when it comes to this whole concept of like love or not love, but he's not actually weighing in on the practical side, right? The actual money and promises that were made. He's not focusing enough on that and having a real conversation with Bertha where he says, listen, here's the deal I'm making with Morgan, and here's the amounts of money we're talking about. Here's how much we have, and here's how much. Like, is he in the wrong for hiding that stuff?
I think he does owe Bertha that conversation, But Bertha hasn't indicated to George that they're anywhere near where that conversation needs to be had. I think that's part of the problem. Go back, and I wish I had the clip. I looked. I don't have the audio clip. He specifically says to her at the end of season 2, when he is looking at the Duke and he's looking at Bertha and he's looking at Gladys and he's doing the calculation himself, what did you promise the Duke to get him here?
Yeah, and specifically in their box.
Specifically in their box. And he leans over and says, what did you promise him? What deal did you do? Because George is not stupid and he knows deals. A deal was done to get him here because up until 20 minutes beforehand, everyone knew he was going to the academy. And Bertha demurs again. I don't talk to you about your business. Don't talk to me about my business. But it is George's business because you're in his business. You're in his money matters. And right or wrong, George, as part of the business side, controls the finances. And yeah, there has to be a conversation of, we have X amount of money to do for dowry and to marry Gladys and to make promises. But why would he have that conversation if Bertha hasn't even given a hint that they're anywhere near there? Yes, is George checked out a little bit? But
you honestly think there's not a hint? What do you? I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, he doesn't. That
they're discussing terms? I don't think so.
Okay.
Because what he's going to offer, let's say he was going ahead with the Carltons and Billy's proposal, that financial arrangement is going to be very different than a financial arrangement he has to give to the Duke.
Right.
Because of considerations. So he wouldn't just have a blanket conversation of, we have X money in the Gladys wedding pot.
But let's think about this for a minute. Okay. We're both parents. And when you come up to certain milestones in kids' lives, whether it be college, whether it be even something silly like getting braces or whatever, there's like conversations during different milestones. How are we going to pay for college? How are we going to, whatever, maybe they need help with a first home or something like that, right? There's conversations that are coming, or you're at that milestone moment where it's appropriate to have that conversation. You right now, your son is getting ready to go off to college. You are starting to think about like, okay, how are those finances going to work? Who's going to pay for what? How's this going to work? Because it's the milestone moment. He hasn't even been accepted anywhere yet, hasn't even applied anywhere yet, but it's part of the conversation of the milestone. So when she's coming out as a woman, I don't understand why not only are you talking about the ball and you do all that and you're having the portrait painted, but you would naturally have a conversation about how much money do we have for a dowry? What are we willing to offer? What are we going to do for an allowance for our daughter? What are we going to do? Just normal household conversation between each other.
We don't know that they didn't have that conversation.
That's true. Stuff happens off screen all the time.
Because we do know, when you go back to the opera war last year, there came a point when George said to Bertha, we have spent too much money already in you trying to win the opera war, and I will not authorize any more money be spent on it, because now you're literally cutting into the business finances trying to win this opera war and to win the Duke specifically. That was the whole point of the Duke conversation of Mrs. Astor can't be outbid by George, but she had something else that she was going to be able to offer the Duke originally, open up the United States to him and a partner. So he didn't authorize any more money after a certain point for the opera war, but a deal was done. Now, should George have been more pointed in saying, did you promise our daughter to the Duke? Because in the realm of possibilities, there's only a few things.
There's not much else
she could have, except for herself, maybe. Maybe on George for not pressing the point more. But I think George and Bertha, from George's point of view, has always been one where she has shared the plans on what was going on. Like the opera war. He was clued in opera war. He knew about the fact that she bartered away the center opera box to Winterton in order to get her on board and also to get the Duke released and all that kind of stuff. And he went and got the box back and took care of all that. So I think George is very blindsided here. And I think the telling line is the Duke and Bertha walk off hand in hand to go to the dinner. And Gladys goes to George, what does this mean? And George says, I'm as surprised as you are, but I will take care of it. And that's his final lines. George is blindsided here. And he's been, I don't want to say cucked, but he's been kind of embarrassed in a significant way in his own home. That's not going to be okay with George.
I don't think it should be okay with anyone.
I don't think that would be okay with it wouldn't Billy be okay Carpenter's with Bertha. Dad. It certainly wouldn't be okay with Bertha. No. She would be raising holy hell. Yeah. Bertha has overstepped and overplayed her hand here, because it's one thing to push your daughter around and force her into a thing. You cannot do that to your partner. You can, but you shouldn't.
And you should start to know that there could be fallout for it. That's the thing.
There are limits on how far you can be pushed.
And I definitely think that George, you guys have to go back to my point and say, but some of this is on his shoulders. I understand he's trying to do the biggest deals of his life. I get that. But you can't pop in on the family and be shocked every time. Then force the issue and ask them questions until you get an answer. And guess what, guys? Of course is not a yes. It just isn't. So when someone says, do you have all the info? And someone says, of course. No. I want a yes or a no. None of this, of course. That's sure. And then which should ring every bell in your head as I do not have all the information. This is not right.
Except for, I think what we're learning here is that in the history of their marriage, which now is at least 20 something years because of Larry's age, I think George has never had to ask Bertha before, have you told me everything? Nothing's been this high stakes. That's the deal. Is that before he had young children. What were we talking about? What private school they went to, or, what friends they had, like you said. But now, again, like I said, this milestone was not a blindside for him. He knew very well who she was going to be getting married to was going to be a topic of conversation in the house. It was absolutely going to be the most important thing to Bertha. So to act what? This milestone is coming up? Come on, George. You knew it was here. At your doorstep. But I really don't think he's acting like that. I think he is surprised at how far it's been progressed because he's now asked twice, dare say thrice. He has asked his wife, what don't I know? What have you done? And she has not answered him. Let me ask you this. How many times is he supposed to ask before it becomes a real fucking problem that she hasn't told him and now is actually outright lying? I mean, she outright lies. And this is not just your business, my business. She lied here. She has now forced George to break a promise to his daughter. And George Russell does not seem like someone who wants to break a promise ever. Certainly not to his daughter. And she has forced his hand to do so. And now she has lied to him directly. That's gonna have repercussions. Y'all, I think the Fanes, I think you nailed on the head. The Fanes are a test case. This is bad business. But I've heard you say this. You're a lawyer, for listeners who don't know. The whole concept of ignorance of the law that's not grounds for defense. Mm-hmm. Him being ignorant to what's going on in his own household is not a good defense. It's really not. Yeah. And to be my daughter's 18 and we're talking about marriage? What the fuck? You know we would be talking about marriage. Why are you acting like you don't know? So that's where I'm just pushing back a little bit. Is Bertha in the wrong? Hell yeah. But George, you don't get to play ostrich head in the sand and then be I'm as shocked as you are. That's embarrassing to admit, George. You should be ashamed to look at your 18-year-old daughter and say, I'm as naive as you are. Really? You are? It definitely makes, and I will take care of it, have a lot less potency. Doesn't it? It's what power do you have if you're not even in on the information? If I'm Gladys and be you were supposed to have taken care of it already. Yeah. Where was the protection, Dad? I'm reminded of Goblet of Fire when Barty Crouch Sr., we learned, was too obsessed with catching Death Eaters to not learn or realize that his own son had become a Death Eater. Mm-hmm. And Sirius, in relating the story to the Golden Trio, says, should have been home more, shouldn't he? Should have been taking more of an interest in his child, shouldn't he? Maybe George needs to be a little more home. Don't be a Barty Crouch Sr., George. I don't know. I understand his business is important, and we do have important business to talk about for him.
My trip out west wasn't about buying copper mines. I said that because you wanted me to believe it. What really you were after was the land that went with the mines. I have a vision. A railroad that will transform this country, and perhaps the world. An illusory vision. I want to connect all the major cities of America, to create a continuous line, from New York to Chicago, and then from Chicago to California, without 10 stops along the way. It can be done. Perhaps. But you say it too easily. This will be a feat to rival Moses parting the Red Sea. You think you have a problem getting round Morenci. Well, till you start trying to rearrange Chicago. It's ambitious, yes. But neither of us would be who we are today without ambition. This line will be built. It must be. The only mystery is who will do it.
So 2 important things to take away from that, I think, is JP Morgan's warning about if you think Morenci was hard to navigate around, wait until you deal with Chicago, which Chicago is the major Western hub right now in the country at this point. So let's just bank that for later because that seems an ominous statement. And also, George, as cutthroat a businessman as he is and robber baron as he is, there is a man of La Mancha, Don Quixote, dream the impossible dream aspect to him that I really like. I like George. I know he's a robber baron. I know we're not supposed to root for robber barons, but I like George and I like his enthusiasm for the impossible. He says it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when someone is going to build this railroad. Why not me? Why not us? Mm-hmm. I like that. That's someone, you know what? That rallies men to him. It rallies JPM. Now, JP Morgan does tell him here, I'm in, but if you fail, you're on your own, which not great, not great, not great, John. But for the most part, I mean, he did him a favor. He did a solid just by showing back up in New York, stabilized the Metropolitan Bank. That's a whole subplot. I'm going to get into the 1884 panic. I think I'm just going to do it on Facebook because it would take too much time here. But the important things there, the Grant and Ward collapse, that led to the Moraine National collapse, which we heard about last week, the Metropolitan Run, which George Cini was eventually found not guilty of the thing, which George has said now in 2 straight episodes. I knew he was innocent. He was found innocent eventually. There's a bunch of stuff going on there. So JP Morgan does really owe a decent amount of fortune to George here. So it's funny. It's interesting to see how far is he going to ride and die on this idea. JP Morgan, in addition to being a tremendous banker, maybe the most important banker ever in America, really made his mark because he put things together. He was the first real mastermind deal maker. He led the consolidations. Like, he created U.S. Steel. He said Carnegie Steel and a bunch of little steel companies, you merge together. He was a trust guy. He not in like had trust with people, but creating trust and monopolies. He was big into that. And his whole thing was, I see the larger picture, but we need to spush you all together so we can all make maximum amount of monies. Again, piece of shit. All these robber barons, pieces of shit. But they had a vision for building the country, which took America from an agrarian backwater to a superpower in less than 200 years. That's built on the back of your Jay Goulds, your George Russells, your John Pierpont Morgan seniors. And he did so much more. I want to talk a little bit about JP Morgan before we move on, because you made a comment about how gnarly he's looking.
Listen, I like Bill Camp very much, and so this is no slam against him, but I feel like the way that he carries himself in this particular episode, he seemed like a toad is the word that I want to use. He just seemed like a guy who I would be very suspicious of and not want to do a lot of business with, especially even just his line of like, I'm with you until I'm not. That's like, oh my gosh.
So JP Morgan had the reputation. He was very gruff. He was very serious. He suffered no fools. He was a large person. He was intimidating. He was like physically large, but conducted himself in a way. There was a quote from his biography that said, as if a gale had blown through the house. That's what it was like for JP Morgan to be in the room. But JP Morgan also had kind of an aesthetic weakness. He suffered from really bad rosacea, and he was very sensitive about it. And his rosacea led to him having a disease called rhinophyma, which literally led to him having essentially a very large bulbous purple nose. And actually, if you zoom in on Bill Camp in this, they colored his nose.
They did. And he was wiping his nose a whole bunch.
And so it was a big thing. And, it was essentially like a sebaceous growth kind of on his nose. He could have treated it, but as a young person, he had suffered from seizures, and he was worried that if he had had his nose condition treated, it would have triggered his seizures again. So he just kind of lived with it and dealt with it. But he used it kind of as part of his scare tactic, a little bit like when the Phantom of the Opera's mask is revealed and it's like, oh, so, again, from Cherno's biography, he talks about how as if he used his appearance to kind of to dare people to meet him squarely and not shrink from the sight of him, essentially asserting the force of his character over the ugliness of his face. But it definitely was an insecurity for him and a social unease about him that we see in this episode, the gruffness and frankness. he's not doing Mrs. Astor like social norms. He's just saying what he thinks because, one, he could, but two, he had all this physical kind of, I don't want to say deformity, but issues going on. One thing I thought was interesting was he did speak with a barking voice, tyrannical manner. There's a picture actually of him doing this. If you tried to get a picture of him on the street, he was very particular about his photo being taken. And because of the rosacea and the rhinophyma, pictures that were authorized of him had to be touched up. So they actually downplayed a lot of the purpleness and the bulbousness of it. But if you tried to get like a TMZ-esque photo of him, he carried a cane with him everywhere and he would beat you with his cane. And there is a photo of him mid-whack of a photographer trying to get a picture of him. There is a drawing, like a New Yorker style drawing of him mid-whack of a photographer with his cane.
You know, maybe that's where that Toad reference in my brain is coming from, because like Mr. Toad from Mr. Toad's Wild Ride has a cane and he's dressed very similarly and actually has a body type that's very similar. And that kind of bumpy face aesthetic is like, I mean, I didn't know that backstory at all. I didn't know anything. I just looked at Mike and was like, God, he has a real Toad aura around him that just feels like that. That's very funny that the cane would be a part of it.
I want to talk about Larry. You are someone I know that takes the wooing very seriously, and I know you believe in good wooing as part of any healthy relationship. Is Larry's wooing of Marion in this episode working for you? In particular, I'm talking about when he's done talking to Jack when they're in the servants' basement in the Van Ryn house, and he takes her first to the archway of the servants' entrance, but then he steals her away to the cab to mooch on her a little bit. Is that wooing, or is this a little bit of him being too aggressive like we were talking last week? One of our Larry red flags that we had identified last week.
I'm actually okay with this one. I didn't feel anything of the same type of vibes that I felt last week with the whole, like, you know, don't make me wait. That felt too, I don't know why I want to say threatening. It just felt that way to me.
Well,
this
it felt like a threat. Don't make me wait.
Or an ultimatum almost, you know, which also felt ugly. Either which way felt bad, especially given Marion's concerns about, again, this is a third strike situation, all that. The one thing that I wasn't so sure about was actually taking her out in that cab. I was completely cool with their little interaction in the like archway of the servants' entrance. That should have been, to me, where it should have ended, because I think he was really pushing it to take them out into the street. I mean, it's literally taking your business out into the street. I think that was a risk, you know, maybe a calculated risk on his part. I do think that it really gave me that feeling of when he pops the coin to the cab driver, all I kept thinking was his father walking into that craft fair and essentially flipping a giant coin purse to the entire fair and buying it all out. But it had that same, it was like junior vibe, but it had that same, like, I can pay off anybody at any time to make my woman happy kind of thing. And so I don't know. For me, I was saying good wooing. This was, for me, it was really making me feel better about Larry from last week, because he seemed like he was being playful and fun and just more relaxed. Not that ultimatum. I don't know. It's too serious. That's too serious to come on like that.
The other Larry storyline that we were tracking from last week, which picks up this week, is with Jack. And we had called it a red flag that he was having Jack do all these drawings, clearly didn't understand how the clock worked as they're preparing for meetings with investors, but was specifically disinviting Jack from attending these meetings.
And then also creating the weird problems with the servants, whether it be, you know, him having to serve Larry at the lunch at their house at Van Ryn's, or whether it was
calling him a genius while serving his food.
Or the flip, you know, creating a situation in his own home where he's making, you know, the guy serve him coffee and everything, and really messing with the servant with that whole situation and messing with the relationship that Jack has with the rest of the staff. I think that was playing with Jack's life too fast, too loose. However, I would say this was one of those times where, again, it happened off screen. Whatever the decision was to have Jack be a part of the meetings happened without fanfare and totally off screen. Like, we have no idea why he changed his mind and what he did. I hope it was because he had some actual moments of truth with himself where he said, you know what, I really don't know how this works, and it isn't the best business decision to have the guy who can't answer any technical questions be the only guy in the room. That's a bad look.
I said at the top of the episode, a lot of the stuff that happens off screen, I'm good with. I don't need to see everything. Just show me that it's changed or you've made a decision. This was one that I wished we had even this one sentence of dialogue or a scene or even some silent acting, something that him being frustrated with a drawing, crumpling it up.
Yeah,
something that indicated, because this is not just a slight turn. This is a 180 reversal of last week.
And it really changes the dynamic of their partnership.
It makes it more like a
Such
partnership.
a serious way. Yeah.
It makes it like a real partnership to have him there. And now he really gets to take him along for the ride, and they're going to have this great suit conversation. I'm glad you talked about confident Larry being a little George-like, because it's going to come up in this clip. But again, listeners, do you think, was it something Marion said off? Because she's still advocating, even in this scene in the servants' quarters, about having Jack do the talking about the clocks. And Jack saying, well, no, I'm not good with words. This is business. Mr. Larry should do the talking. But Marion has clearly consistently been advocating for Jack to be part of the process. So did she say something off scene? It certainly wasn't anything she said last week that we saw. Was it advice from George about how to deal with partners? Or was it his own sense? Like he had some moment of going over the drawings and was like, I just don't know what the hell I'm talking about here. Right. And I do need Jack to be there because it is bad business. Not because he necessarily even wanted to be friendly to Jack, but just good business. I'm okay if it's just good business sense of the guy who made the thing needs to be there to answer questions. Let's listen to this clip from when they're at the tailor, though, because this is a Larry we have not seen and maybe is part of the coin tossing Larry.
I think it definitely is.
And it maybe gives a hint of what Jack can be also.
That's smart. Should the waist be a bit tighter? No. Give him a little more room. And can you narrow these lapels?
I like them.
They're too showy. The gentleman never looks as if he's trying to be smart. He simply is smart, without making any effort to be so.
Do you wear a handkerchief in the top pocket?
Not often. And if I do, you won't see much of it. Again, no signals. We're after understated elegance.
It's complicated, isn't it?
Not really, unless you're a show-off. Are you a show-off, Jack?
I don't think so. I never had much to show off until now.
That'll change if things go well for us.
I love the line understated elegance. That's something in my own household growing up was one of my dad's lines for sure, is that we should all look like understated elegance was our goal. Because you know what? In many ways, my family comes from immigrant past and we very recently were from Lithuania. And for me, I feel like there is that sense of like, you need to fit in, but you need to fit in a way that's not showy. That's not, you're not trying to shine some light on yourself. Like the best way to look like you fit in here is to have that understated elegance. But there was something about Larry in this with that smoking the cigar and the way that his curls were on his forehead and stuff. He was pulling full George. I was only seeing his father in that conversation. It almost sounded like a conversation his dad may have had with Larry. And he was just like having this whole mentoring moment with Jack that really felt like he was being like kind of fatherly, but also a little godfatherly. Like a little bit like, I need to teach you how to live in this world and be a part of this.
Very much.
This, I don't know how to say it. Like, it's like, there's something a little bit more to it that feels a little like we're teaching you how to act within, like it feels like organized crime to me. But I mean, there's.
Well, that's because of the cigar and the suit and all of that.
I guess so, yeah.
There's fake it till you make it, though. I mean,
very much.
There's very much fake it till you make it. This is the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain kind of. You can teach the basics, but then you have to kind of go through the rote of it until you actually embody it. And so I think the suit is acting as armor, or at least like an entrance ticket of don't talk, but look the part at least get you in the door like you belong there, even if you don't say anything. But there's also the George voice coming out of Larry's mouth is a little bit like, it reminded me of when grown-up Simba roars for the first time and it sounds like Mufasa's roar at the beginning. Yeah. It's a little bit like that where it's like, well, his father is within him. This is what I was trying to say about Gladys earlier. There's no way a little George and a little Bertha don't reside in her. Because there's a little bit Larry. Remember where Larry started? I want to be an architect and build buildings. I don't want to be a man of industry. That's Larry in season 1. Very namby-pamby. Very like, I don't want to be my father. Look at him now, smoking his cigars and talking about understated elegance and fashion tips and about being, are you a show-off, Jack? Is that who you are? You're like, God damn, like, all right, you can get it, Larry.
You know, here's the thing, though, too, Justin, you talking about that. I mean, what are we talking about? We are talking about fashion. And so who is he really channeling? Bertha.
Because he's his
and so he's totally channeling her too, where he's like, you know, we need to look the part, we need to act the part. I mean, this is Bertha's words as much as anyone else, probably more than George's, honestly. Yeah. While he physically looked like and had the mannerisms of George, his message was really Bertha's message of like, look like you fit in here and you will fit in here.
Yeah. Let's head down to the servants real quick. I think the biggest thing happening in the Russells' basement this week is that mysterious letter from last week that Mr. Borden received was information that his wife had died. Again, this comes to the part of, do we care about Borden and Miss Bruce? I don't know. I think they're cute. I think they were very cute at the opera last year.
Yeah.
I think their courting when they were caught in the rain in the park is very cute, but I don't know how much I really care.
I hope that they continue to have a little bit of some comic relief, though, because we do need some light relationships in the show. I mean, we lost Aurora and Charles as being just like a kind of a lighter, easier relationship that we could kind of go over to. Now it's like every single situation feels like more strained, even down to our smallest of relationships of Borden and Bruce.
But Borden and Bruce did feel a little strained because Church asks him, are you going to tell Miss Bruce about, because now he can fully court her. I mean, he's been technically married and separated this entire time. No matter how far he took it with Miss Bruce, there was going to be a limit on whether or not he was going to propose or really take it to that next step. They seem like they're very into each other.
They do.
He's now free to, and he kind of smiles at Church and says, I'm just waiting for the right time. And so then
that warmed my heart, though. So
he's a very sweet man.
But in episodes that are hard and strained and a lot of arguing and a lot of fighting, that's where I feel like a Borden Bruce moment can bring a little bit of relief.
How much is Mrs. Bruce's words, though, going to deflate his enthusiasm? Because in case you guys weren't paying attention or you're snoozing during this part, he comes out with his lobsters and he says, so I will feel so sorry for Miss Gladys if she can't marry for love. And Miss Bruce, without looking up at Borden, is saying she's doing her work. She says, so she believes it because she said it without thinking. She says plenty of people with free choice regret their decisions and regret the partners that they enter into with, or the love matches. That's essentially her thing, is plenty of people who aren't in forced marriages regret picking the partners that they picked.
And that's a little bit going back to our whole conversation about the Duke and going round and round about like what can happen. Again, you could make a free will choice and have a shit marriage. Yep. Like, be real. Like, they're trying to act like every time you choose for yourself, everything turns out perfectly. And on the flip side, every time you make a choice is made for you, it's going to be disastrous. And it's like, there is the other side to that on both of these issues. Whether you marry of your own free accord or whether someone arranges it for you, both of those can turn out good or bad.
Let's head across the 61st Street to the Van Ryn house. Mostly Peggy stuff, Peggy adjacent information that's going on there this week of real note. Just as in passing, her first novel installment has been published, and she is now feeling better also from her sickness. I don't know where we're going to go with this novel, but I just want to point it out because it's said kind of just in passing.
It's really quiet, but it is consistent.
Right. So I want to point it out just so we're not losing track of it. And, with 6 episodes to go still. I obviously the big doings are that the Scotts come to 61st Street. That's how we end last week. And we see them. And there's that whole first conversation about Dorothy going through the servant's door. And Arthur says, we were invited by this woman to her house.
Yeah.
We are going in the front door. And they do. I want to jump to the end conversation between Agnes and the Scotts, because I think it summarizes the tension going on throughout the episode whenever they're together. Arthur very much wants to chomp at the bit about life's injustices that he has had to live through as a former slave who has now made his way in the world and yet still has to feel the indignity of doctors not wanting to treat his sick daughter. Mm-hmm. And Agnes and her defenses of it, and whether or not they're weak defenses or good defenses. So let's play the final clip between them.
Please, come and sit.
Mrs. Van Ryn, forgive me for saying this, but your attitude is not what we are used to, especially on Fifth Avenue.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But you know it to be true.
Maybe, but it is not how we were raised. We were brought up to be well-mannered. Towards everyone, And that is what I believe in. Simple good manners.
I agree.
I'm not convinced good manners will prove an effective cure for 2.5 centuries of slavery.
No, I suppose not.
And good manners did not oblige your doctor to treat our daughter when she was dangerously ill.
I know, and I'm very sorry about that, but I
thought he would set aside his prejudice because he was frightened.
I don't know, maybe, but I believed he would act when he saw the urgency.
When did you see the urgency?
Well, I know he was slow to grasp just how ill Miss Scott was, but after I'd seen her, I did everything I could.
I'm sure you did.
I know what it's like when your child is sick.
I'd say that we've both had our scares over the years, but I think that children were mainly sent to frighten you.
Isn't that the truth?
I love that line of Dorothy's. That is so true. I feel like children are mainly sent to worry you. I did think that Agnes and Ada in this entire episode, when it had to come to the Scotts, they were pulling cards from a long time ago to talk about their father's patronage of the school in Philly. It came off so much like not just like I have a black friend, but it comes off like my dad once had a black person that he supported. And it sounded so weak and so thin. And it was like, ladies.
That they laugh. They laugh at Dorothy and Arthur literally laugh in the cab ride about it because it's such weak stuff.
And they run right by it too. When she says it in the hallway, Dorothy goes, yeah, we know about the school. Like, that's old news. And like a lot of like, what have you done lately? I mean, you're really hanging your hat on something that happened a long time ago. And Arthur's right in bringing up the like, yeah, but what is the world we're living in today? And I appreciate your talk of manners and stuff, but let's get real. Calling your doctor was not the right call, you know? And like let's talk through this from like a safety and health standpoint. You can't act ignorant to the way that society is right now and then hide behind like manners as like, oh, I thought it would work out this way. Arthur's right to say, come on, you know better than that.
I think that's what Arthur was really trying to get at, because what we see here at the end of the episode, the clip we just played, is the second or third time he visits it in the episode. And there's 2 or 3 times where Agnes's response is not how we were raised, which is all very well and good, but you are not the entirety of the world. And I think Arthur is just trying to get Agnes to say out loud, you understand, though, that our experience here, you inviting us to sit in your parlor and take care of our daughter and employ her when plenty of people wouldn't, you understand that that's not actually how the world actually is. And I think Arthur needs Agnes to acknowledge that, because at the end of the day, Peggy's going to be better. Yes, they're going to go up to Newport, and we introduced to Black Newport Society, which is a real thing. And I'm very excited for them to be visiting that this season. But at some point, she's going to return to 61st Street. And the Scotts need to know that their daughter is with someone who understands how the world actually is.
Yeah.
And that if she does get sick again, don't call Dr. Lewis. Go call Dr. Kirkland. Go call me, the pharmacist. Let's deal with it in the real world way, not the way where good manners and fear, because the doctor has treated your family since they signed the Declaration of Independence. That's not how the world actually is. You need to understand that if we're going to leave our daughter here.
I also think it's a really good idea always to remind the audience of where Arthur specifically, where his background comes from and the decisions that he makes and the comments that he makes. The fact that he brings slavery up and reminds the audience like, hey, listen, this is how far our family has come and why we are more cautious, more conscientious of the people around us, like, because we've seen it at its worst. So don't try to sugarcoat stuff. We've got to take it for what reality is. I don't know if that's going to come into play as we are moving into more of a storyline for Peggy here. I don't know if his past is going to come back in any way to cause an issue or to cause him to have reservations about where Peggy's going in life, because we know that to be true. We know he really just wanted her to be safe and I want to say protected, like same as, Gladys and George. and
but
understanding.
In Brooklyn also, he didn't want her crossing the bridge.
No.
He wanted her to be running the pharmacy. He wanted it to be Scott and kids, not sons, but Scott and daughter. And he never wanted her leaving Brooklyn Heights.
Because that's where he could make sure she was safe. You know, that's where he knew you could only put the fence around your kiddo so far. And that was a way in order to protect her. So I am interested in, again, having this conversation. I don't feel that Lord Fellows would put this type of conversation in here if the concept of civil rights and being able to trust white people, black people having to deal with this prejudice, all the stuff that's going on. I think that we're stirring the pot up and reminding the audience about this for a reason. I feel like pay attention to what is coming, because there's something about starting. You don't have this conversation with Agnes in her parlor unless it matters.
Right. And also, I think for viewers, they need to remember, yes, we're in 1884, 19 years since the end of the war. That's 19 years. Arthur Scott was a slave just 19 years ago. Yeah. Pretty much probably when Peggy was a baby or just about to be born was when the Civil War was ending. We have literally not even gone a generation in the show's timeline since there were slaves. Now you have the Scotts sitting in this parlor on 61st Street and 5th Avenue, which is tremendous. But Agnes needs to understand that is not the norm. And we're trusting our daughter with you a large amount of the time. We need to understand that you understand that the world does not operate like us. I played the clip at the beginning of it. That was a very long clip. It was like 3 minutes. I had to cut it down a lot. I played the beginning of it. Listen to it again. Agnes says, "Come, sit." Arthur makes it sound literally like, because no white person has ever asked him to sit in their parlor on 61st Street before. But Dorothy, though, when they're just themselves in the cab, and the couple times that we see them just amongst themselves, she says, our daughter, though, for all intents and purposes, is better off in that house than many other places that she could be. So they understand the opportunity Peggy is getting by being and working for Agnes Van Ryn and being in the Van Ryn house, but we need to know that Peggy is with people who understand how the world actually works. What did you think of the introduction of Newport and the fact that we've learned a new name, Athena, who we've never heard of before, but the Scotts are going to Newport?
I'm looking forward to it. I want to see what this whole side of Newport is like. I want to understand more about how this all came to be. So I'm looking forward to it. I want to see the Scotts in Newport.
You look better than you did yesterday.
Oh, yesterday's rather a blur.
That's due to the fever.
I do remember my parents were here.
They sent for me.
Do you work with my father?
In the way of things. My father used to get treatment for arthritis at your father's pharmacy. Often I'd go with him and watch Mr. Scott mix up his potions. When I found out he owned the store and heard him advise patrons about which medicine to take, my world was cracked open. I don't recall seeing you around the store.
I went to school in Philadelphia, so I wasn't there much.
All right, Caroline, what's first impressions of Dr. William Kirkland, Jordan Donica, joining the show tonight in what will be a recurring role?
I think he's great. I think he's somebody who makes a great match for Peggy. They both seem so ready to find like the next step in their lives, like what that's going to be, that it makes me excited for the two of them in a funny way. Because if you look at every other young person, there's all this angst around them. You know, there's all this like, what am I going to do? Whether you're Marion or whether you're Larry or whether you're Jack or Gladys, it doesn't matter who you are, right? Like there's all this like upset feeling about what's going to happen next. But thankfully, we have Peggy and we have Dr. Kirkland, who you actually can feel a little bit excited for. Like they have things going on. I love their deep connection, that it was Arthur that actually inspired Dr. Kirkland to go into medicine and everything. I think that's a really cool extra little added layer that they didn't have to have at all, but I think was really great. And Peggy seems very comfortable with him and they seem relaxed together. And I don't know how it's going to look to the Kirkland family where Peggy is in life. Like, I don't know if they're going to run into the same sort of like, what's the status of this person kind of business that we see with Gladys and we see with Marion and we see everybody else. Like, there's all these worries about who is this other person and do they bring enough to the table?
We don't know how the world, how the high society works yet. with Black America
right
out of Newport. It's
no idea. So I'm hopeful for her. I don't know if having a pharmacist dad who used to be a slave is going to be any type of problem versus where she is, where she's a working woman. That's also problematic. I mean, the idea that she works and the idea that she's a writer, that is also problematic. In TV shows I watch all the time, I brought up Gilmore Girls in the last episode. But when you get to high society, the idea of having ambition of your own for a career as a woman is not smiled upon. And so it's one of those things that I'm hopeful for her that she is going to find in Dr. Kirkland, which he seems very open. He wanted to read, the excerpt and everything.
Awkward, but very cute.
Yes, like there's potential here.
It's funny, I never really thought about it, but you take Dr. Kirkland here and you take Peggy, there are a lot of young people or youngish people in this show. They are by far the two most accomplished. He's already a doctor. He's already a doctor, an accomplished doctor. He solves Peggy's mysterious cold from the travels. And she was a very successful already reporter journalist. And now she's already getting her novel published in a newspaper, which is how a lot of novels were published at that time. In the 1800s, Charles Dickens used to have his novels published installment style in newspapers in England. Like, this was a thing. Like, these are two accomplished people. When you think about what Gladys, Larry, Marion, Oscar, what they have not accomplished in life, look at these two. I mean, I think we could all do to be a little bit of a Peggy and Dr. Kirkland. Let's stay in the Van Ryn house. I don't want to spend particularly a lot of time on Ada. I'm not happy about how any of this goes, but I have to ask, is Ada right to propose the pledge, the temperance pledge on the servants, especially when she knows the upstairs occupants, Oscar, Agnes, she learns Marion, will not be expected to live by the pledge?
I think she's so naive and such an innocent character that I don't think she knows any different than just to think, oh, if I'm interested in this, then everyone else is going to be interested in this. I think she reads the room so poorly, but we knew that about her. I mean, we knew that she's not accustomed to being the one to call the shots. So I don't think she ever has gained the skill of what is the pulse of my household and what do I think is going to happen. I also think that she's overplaying her hand about the fact that she is the head of household now. I don't think that should tell people what they can eat or drink or do with their free time. Like, I think she is overstepping her bounds big time. And if I was the staff, I'd be like, do I have to even answer this? Like, I don't even want to say yes or no. If I want to sign it in my free time, if I want to go to the Temperance Society and go sign this pledge, that's for me to do. But like, to sign it with my employer feels wrong.
Bauer says it right. She's like, we work all of the hours that God gives us. I want to have a beer at night. I'm a German immigrant. I want to have my beer at night. What did you think of the fact that it was Armstrong was the one who signed it? Betrayal of Agnes? Will it have repercussions?
Gosh, I don't know if she's just
was it her just latching on to the one who's in power now?
That, or maybe even she's kind of a skinflint kind of person where I feel like she probably doesn't ever spend money. Like, she wouldn't be someone eating a candy bar or something, like she's so austere and she kind of like takes comfort in being, I think, a harsh person, even with herself, that I think that she would deny herself pleasures just because that's her personality,
So the Episcopal Church in the 1800s launched the Temperance Society of the Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States of America, for short, the Church Temperance Society. They were actually proponents of what we're talking about here as the temperance movement. But here's the thing. In promoting temperance, they considered the moderate consumption of alcohol to be perfectly acceptable. Now, if you wanted to do total abstinence, they were totally fine with that. But alcohol, the way Marion says it, at dinner, occasional drink at dinner or dessert,
a glass of wine,
church, which is the point that Luke drank wine, Jesus drank wine, that Agnes kind of jokingly makes last week. This is Ada overcompensating for something that she thinks would honor her husband, but I think she's dead wrong. And I think her naivete and sad face combined with her money, she's like a kid with a gun.
No.
I'm trying to be real moderate here and give her here, but I think I'm seeing what I was worried about, and I know I have to check this because it's not fair to the character, but I expected her to become kind of insufferable. And I think this episode and this pledge very much confirms that she's headed on that, because I think it is an abuse of power, because she's the one calling the shots.
Personal life.
You should, Yes. you are so desperate for people to think the way you think. It's like when Miss Carlton says, after she loses all the other arguments, well, I want to pull rank here. So Ada loses all the other arguments. No one's on board with this, but then she has to be like, well, I pay the bills here now, and I'm your employer.
I don't like any of it.
No, I'm going to keep
It's a bad look
trying to
for
be,
Ada.
it's a very bad look for her. I'm going to try and be cool about it, but I don't like what I'm seeing. What do you think about the fact that it's Aurora Fane who settles the power struggle?
It needed to be a voice from the outside who was looking at this. Yeah, because I think that they can't see the forest through the trees when it's just the two of them barking at each other. So I think it needed to be someone from the outside saying, look, we can all see the writing on the wall. We all see who is actually in charge here. So knock it off. Like, this isn't even fun conversation for the rest of us at all. You're boring us with this. So move on, make a decision, move on. It's Ada, then done. Decision made.
Let's revisit the Ghastly Gathering. I think there was only one person in that entire room who actually ended up having a good time at the Ghastly Gathering, the Young Women's Christian Association meeting. I think that was Oscar.
Why haven't you come to see me before now?
Why? To inflict my misery on you.
Because I love and believe in you.
If I could only take that to the market.
You can. I'll write a check for you to invest, and when I talk about it, others will follow.
Would you do that for me?
I'd do anything for you.
I don't know what to say.
Say that you'll double my money.
Thank you. I mean it, and I will.
Oscar very rarely fails to make me laugh, and he did. I couldn't fit it into the clip because it would have made it too long, but I like how he describes when John Adams first comes up to him and he says, I'm not doing well. And then he describes how he's quite literally in the innermost ring of hell about topping it off about the fact that his aunt, who now has all of the money, is joining the Temperance Society. It was just very good Blake Ritson deadpanning. But what do you think? The return of John Adams coming with a check, literally white knighting Oscar here.
I think it's amazing. And yay for John Adams, because we needed something very dramatic to turn things around for Oscar. And there didn't look like there was any kind of life raft coming for him in any way. And so to see John Adams, just like you said, like the white knight coming in, being willing to invest money with him and talk him up and everything, beautiful, and a great resolution to Oscar's story of like, how do you rebuild? What could you possibly do? This is very reasonable storytelling. This is like, yeah, okay, I see how this works. They laid the foundation so nicely in the first 2 seasons to show us that this rings true. John Adams would do this, and these two characters would support each other. So love it. I think it's perfect.
And that Oscar would not have thought to go back to him given how they ended things.
Right.
It really needed to be John Adams to be the one to approach him and say, it's water under the bridge. I love you. I believe in you. I will do anything I can for you. Oscar needed to hear that because he would never have had the confidence to think he could approach John. And honestly, would have been probably a bad look for him. Like, I know I kind of broke your heart trying to pursue Gladys, Russell.
It would have seemed insincere.
It would have seemed insincere. But for John to come back the other way, one shows Oscar that someone does care and love him. Doesn't think he is a slug the way Agnes has been treating him, which I get her anger, but also it's your son, especially given the story you tell the Scotts about the typhoid and how scared she was that he was going to die. That was a part of that whole
Oscar's antics.
I know, but that was a part of the conversation that we really kind of skipped over. Was Agnes and the Scotts really do end as friends, which it's a very dramatic ending. What did you think of that? We didn't even talk about that. They say goodbye to each other in a very final kind of way, as if the Scotts are never planning on being back there again. And maybe never even seeing Agnes again.
That's a wild idea.
It was very dramatic. I don't know if you remember. It was thank you, goodbye.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was. Sticking with Oscar, I feel like Oscar needed this turn. He needed something to happen here because I was like, how are they going to get him out of his room? How are they ever going to, because you can't find the next step in your room. So how's this going to work out? So I'm really glad they had him come to this meeting, which, by the way, the entire Charles Fane of it all has to be our ending here because I honestly cannot believe it. Charles is unbelievable with his actions.
When Aurora says to him at their first scene in this episode, when he returns home because he has to pick up clothes, and he's been ignoring her letters, and she says, "Don't you care at all?" And Charles's response is that he does not respond. He turns on his heel and heads upstairs. So when he shows up with the lady in tow, the mistress in tow,
God,
how cruel. I mean, you could see here, it's in all capitals, bold. Charles is so cruel.
It was so ugly and so unnecessary. I mean, I get it that he's trying to, force her hand, but where is his sense of dignity and pride? Like, he's willing to just be so blatant in his actions. Like, it is so ugly. And now Mrs. Astor knows, which means everybody's gonna know. She figured it out in 30 seconds.
When she says to her, "So you'll be spending more time in Newport now?"
Ouch.
Ouch. I mean, talk about the savage speed with which she picks up how society treats these issues. How do you come back from this? You have to leave now, I feel like. Aurora has to leave. This is beyond the pale.
It is.
Beyond the pale.
I honestly do not know how you save face.
I love that Mrs. Astor is also like, "And now I'll take my leave." She always pieces out whenever something goes remotely wrong at these gatherings.
I think the second it gets distasteful.
She's like,
"I'm not going to be seen here any longer."
Let's stay with the Astors, because one of the new characters we met in this episode was Charlotte Astor. That's Lena's middle child. Just little background, because the only thing we really get in this episode is Mrs. Astor whisper threatening to Carrie, "Go manage your sister." And so Carrie goes over with Gladys and introduces and pulls Charlotte away from the man she's speaking to. Just so you guys know, Charlotte is talking to Hallett Alsop Barrow. You just need to trust me on that. That's who she's speaking to. She is in fact married to a man named J. Coleman Drayton. That's the background we need to know for Charlotte, and the fact of you need to manage your sister means Charlotte was probably talking to someone she should not be talking to. Let's just leave it at that, because again, if you guys want to, go look up Charlotte Astor's history, but important things to know going on at the Young Women's Christian Association meeting. Charlotte's going to be a handful for Mrs. Astor in a way that Carrie Astor has not been. Other people we need to know from the Young Women's Christian Association meeting is we meet Mr. Merrick. He seems to be a great admirer of Bertha's. He had mentioned...
And also a giant flirt with her.
Very flirty with Mamie Fish, too. Had her laughing in stitches. Yeah, she says, Mamie says to Bertha, "What's your title going to be? Mother of a Duchess must have some kind of title." And Mr. Merrick says his great sassy line of, "One lucky woman."
Oh my gosh. He's a whole scene. I am very interested in how he's going to play out in more of the season. He's got a lot of sass, and he definitely charmed Bertha. I mean, she was given like the, she was genuinely laughing too.
He started by saying, and this is a man obviously of society, probably of great wealth, and essentially saying, like, "I've seen you at the Met, but I've been too intimidated to come talk to you." That's the weight of Bertha's heart. I mean,
he played his hand perfectly with her.
You could hear Mamie Fish's corset pumping. I mean,
I seriously, like, very much played it exactly right with Bertha. And she surprised me in that she, like, absolutely did not have her guard up with him. Like, she was, like, laughing and playing and going with it, like, super happy with the whole thing. So I was like, whoa, what is going on here?
The last thing I wanted to say, just because I think it's something that harkens back to my own personal theory about Jack from last week of there's going to be rubber that hits the road. Jack can't be a successful inventor with Larry and also be serving dinner to Larry and to other people. And in this episode, we're reminded that of again when he's with Marion and Larry downstairs and they're going over plans and they're talking about the meeting and they're doing it. Miss Armstrong, Miss Bauer is cooking a meal. And they're talking about, we're going to have this meeting. You're going to ask questions. It's going to be great. You have a suit. Don't worry. I'll get you a suit. And then Miss Bauer says, "Jack, you got to bring up the coffee. You have to get the coffee." What a cold water bath. Jack can't be getting the coffee. It's hard to be a man of business when you have to stop to get the coffee. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying again, it's setting a table where Jack is going to eventually, I think, have to choose, because how can you be both? How can you go to meetings, even if Ada is willing to give him the time off to go to these meetings, when you have to worry about getting back to get the coffee or run letters to Brooklyn because Miss Scott's sick?
Right. We got to cross our fingers, though, that Larry's going to be a good partner and everything's going to be on the up and up. I have some concerns, but this was a good turn for him to bring Jack into the meetings, for him to come over and go over the meetings. Like, this felt better. This felt a lot better better. Like, okay, this is what I want to see.
And it's the Larry we want to see, right? This
Yes.
confident Larry, but good Larry. The best version of Larry. Let's keep more with that. I think that's going to take us to the end of this episode.
This is Caroline.
And this is Mike. Thank you for listening to New Money, Old Rules, the Gilded Age Podcast. If you wouldn't mind heading over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, and subscribe. And while you're there, especially at Apple or Spotify where you can leave comments, leave us a 5-star review. If you do, we're going to read it on air and just say nice things. If you don't say nice things, we are not going to read it on air and we will judge you. I want to read 2. One from last season that I didn't get to read. This is from Molly Cat 5, Refreshing Perspectives. Shout out to both of you for continuing to provide the Gilded Age fans excellent content. Not only is it comprehensive, but also references the actual historical content, and the banter between the two of you is fabulous. I always find myself saying yes to a lot of your predictions and theories, and I love that it's each of your opinions. Thank you for your hard work. Also, I'm so excited and happy that Jack's story of success came to fruition. Probably my fave storyline. Well, thank you, Molly Cat 5. We also are rooting for Jack. We thought we weren't going to care about the storyline at all, and here we are. This one is just from this past week. This is from Cookie9432, 5 stars. Best Gilded Age pod. 2 articulate and thoughtful hosts. How refreshing.
Aw, I love it. Thank you guys so much for writing into us. We appreciate it so very much.
We asked that for so many of our different podcasts, and this is one podcast where you guys do turn out and give us your thoughts. Spotify contest, we actually have a little bit of a conversation. Leave us your thoughts. We'll be able to interact with you, and we just appreciate you guys listening. You put us into the top 170 podcasts in the country globally for Apple Podcasts, for TV podcasts. So thank you guys for listening to us.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.